Okay, hello everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell. This is Friday, October 17th in the year Beyond Thunderdome 2013. This is news and views from the Nefarium for those of you who are regulars here. For those of you who aren't, news and views is just kind of my personal take on what I think is kind of interesting news for the past week. The Nefarium is my nickname for the residencies and places of conspiring of the worldwide international globalonialist elite. So, actually, the term Nefarium is the nickname my students used to give my lodgings, but I've transferred it. All right, so there's some announcements. We have book announcements, we have technology, internet announcements concerning me and why I've been having all the problems, which hopefully some of which are resolved, and then finally we'll get on to the technological news. So first of all, let's do the books. I did hear from my publisher Adventures Unlimited that Covert Wars and Clash of Civilizations is on the way back from the printer to Adventures Unlimited, and that they're expecting it either late this week or early next week. Now what this means, for those of you who have back orders with Adventures Unlimited, I've worked in their warehouse myself. I know their procedures. As soon as the truck arrives and the pallet is off the truck, they will take some boxes directly to the order fulfillment area and begin filling back orders. They are that fast on the turnaround. So for those of you with back orders on that particular book with Adventures Unlimited, patience, they should be arriving, I would imagine, within the next 2 to 3 weeks, depending on what you specified for shipping. In terms of those of you who've ordered that book off of Amazon, off my web store, or from Barnes & Noble, the other thing Adventures Unlimited will do is they send out a truck, I think about twice a week back when I was there. They will send out a pallet as soon as they have a truck to send it on, which will be within a week. All right. So the turnaround time from Adventures to Unlimited to the distributor is rather quick. It's about 2 weeks. From the distributor to Amazon and Barnes & Noble, that I don't know. So for those of you who are waiting for the order from Amazon or Barnes & Noble, it still could be about 3 to 4 weeks before they're in a position to start filling those orders. Now, for those of you who order off my web store, and I appreciate that, that does add a few extra pennies. For those of you doing that, like I say, the web store is directly connected with Amazon, so it depends on Amazon's turnaround. I simply get a little fee from Amazon for advertising books on my web store, so that's what that is. The other book, Financial Vipers of Venice, I have not heard anything from Farrell House in a couple of weeks. I don't know where they're at in the process. I do know I saw the galas, I saw the new cover art, so I'm guessing that that is at the printer in some stage or process. So I would imagine that we're still looking, unfortunately, at October as a release date for Financial Vipers of Venice. Now, on the home front, I'm loath to talk about personal situations in much detail, but I wanted to talk about this because so many of you have been very patient putting up with internet and computer issues. And the reason I hope that we have most of those resolved. The reason it's taken so long is that there were 3 separate issues that were working here. And I knew when the problem started that it was not just my computer. Some of it was my computer. I now have a new computer, which I saw on sale, so I just decided to go ahead and get it and take care of that particular part of the problem. I'm hoping that it will alleviate some of it. But there were 2 other layers of problems that were involved that are beyond my control, so that does mean that I might continue to have some issues. The first part is really beyond my control, and that is that it does appear that there was some sort of external influence that may have been going on, not necessarily with us per se, meaning me, Dr. DeHart, George Ann Hughes, and incidentally Secretary Fitz. I contacted all of them, and each of us were experiencing very bizarre things. Not so much problems, but just bizarre things on the internet. Dr. DeHart in particular, and then George Ann Hughes and Secretary Fitz and I have had some connectivity issues and we given what the four of us discussed, I won't go into details, but given what was being done, what was happening, we do think that it was an external attempt. We're not pointing any fingers. We don't know who this was, what they were trying to do, but it was definitely a factor in what was going on with my problems. The second level, the kind of middle ground level, was my internet provider kept telling me that there were no problems with their connection. I kept telling them, yes, there are. So due to another issue that they had to make a service call out here, they did look at their connection. They again told me that there were no problems, but I noticed them fixing things. So what does that tell you? I don't know. All right, let's move on to the news that I want to talk about, because this has been, I don't know about you, but I've been noticing that there are very, very strange stories that are surfacing that, had we seen these stories about 10 or 15 years ago, we would have thought this the kind of science fiction that the lunatic fringe likes to talk about. Now, the three stories in question, I'll link these for you when I post the article on the website. The first one is actually a video that's interesting. I'll try and hold it up there. NASA's first step towards a replicator, 3D printing in space. The next one is an article that appeared on the UK's Daily Mail online. The title of that article is "The Ultimate Star Trek Gadget Point-and-Shoot Scanner Copies and Creates Almost Any Item Using a 3D Printer." And then a final article from our good friends at phys.org, in which they have a new quantum computing teleportation entanglement report to make. So let's look at these three articles and connect some dots as to what the implications might be. In other words, we're doing our usual high-octane speculation. Now, with the 3D printing in space, this is actually to kind of a video, and I've been predicting that the real goal of 3D printing may have something to do with space. And I was kind of shocked, because no sooner had I said that than people had found articles where just a few weeks or months prior to me saying that, they found these articles where NASA has been testing rockets that were printed with 3D printers and so on and so forth. So in other words, 3D printing is poised to be the vehicle by which they're going to bring down, or attempt to bring down, costs, labor, energy costs, and manufacturing costs. And notice, they're now talking about manufacturing in space with 3D printing. Now that's a huge step, and I suggest that this is intimately coupled to that phenomenon of collateralizing space that I've been arguing ever since the bearer bond scandals broke, with the Japanese bearer bond scandal and so on, that I've been arguing is the collateralization that was behind the hidden system of finance that was put into place by the powers that be after the end of World War II, in particular under the Truman administration. Now, that, of course, is conjecture. And folks, I don't want you running out and saying, well, this is what I believe. No, it's a scenario. It's a model. It could be vastly wrong. I certainly don't think this is the only reason that the powers that be are trying to push 3D printing, and they really appear to be doing it with a vengeance. I suspect that what they're doing is planting the meme, acclimatizing people to social and economic change that's going to come about because of these new technologies coming online. That, I think, is the primary thing. The space part of it, the space component, I'm not saying it's secondary in terms of importance, but it's a corollary. It's an offspin of what they're trying to do, and part of that concerns space. Now, I'm mentioning this because I've been pointing out how the latest meme that they're planting in terms of space issues is mining asteroids. And I've been trying to alert everybody that, yeah, you can do this with rockets, but they're going to be small asteroids, and it's not going to be very cost effective for you to do so. To make it cost effective, you have to bring down the costs of manufacturing the equipment to go out, get the asteroid, and mine it. 3D printing is that. But the idea of mining asteroids is significant because it does suggest that at some point along the line they took the deliberate decision to collateralize space and what we would find out there. So in other words, we're looking at the fulfillment of a long-term agenda that was laid down at World War II in the national security establishment. The secret is coming out into the open. That's the real point here. Now, let's get on to the next interesting thing, and that's this Daily Mail article. I'll try and hold that up. I'll link these for you. You can see one of these new 3D scanners. And what this scanner allows you to do, according to this article, is to point and literally scan a three-dimensional object into a 3D printer, which will then print it off. Now, I know that with all new technologies, the claims are going to exceed the reality. Probably most of these 3D printers that are available to people like you and me are not going to be able to do this stuff yet. They're at the Commodore computer stage. For those of you who remember Commodore computers, well, that's the stage that 3D printers are at now. But what I'm suggesting is that with the progression of the technology 30 to 40 years down the line, things like this are going to become very commonplace. You need a spare part for your car or your refrigerator, point, scan, print. Okay? So it's going to dramatically transform the economy. The big warehouse stores that you see now, Home Depot, Lowe's, and so on, I think they're going to go the way that the big bookstores went with the publishing revolution, with e-books, with self-publishing of books by authors like you and me. You can go on, order a book, and they'll print one copy just for you. This is revolutionizing things. It is transforming age-old industries, and 3D printing is going to do exactly the same thing. Plus, now you'll note the utility of this type of device magnified to a tremendous scale to be able to produce large things, all right? If you can imagine this technology coupled with 3D printing in space, you see where I'm going. Because it will allow you to literally manufacture things in space at a relatively cheaper cost. And that's key. And the part of the problem that's the key here is if you've been following where I've been going over the years with my writing about hidden technology, speculations about the Nazi bell, and so on and so forth, if you've been following all that, what I've been trying to argue is not so much that human beings are not capable of making this advanced, if you will, field propulsion or anti-gravity technology. There's two problems. The first problem is in the public record, public physics will tell you that there are various roadblocks in the way, enormous amounts of energy required, for example, to create a space warp. This was the finding immediately after Miguel Alcubierre published his warp drive paper in, I think it was the Journal of Quantum Gravity. Physicists out there may know and be able to correct me on that. But now there is a theory that NASA's entertaining with Dr. Harold White, that the energy requirements may not be nearly so much if you configure the geometry of how you're creating the warp drive differently. And incidentally, the geometry involves two rings that are asymmetrical in size. One ring is bigger than the other, all right? And if that's beginning to sound a little familiar, it should. Okay? That's my take on it anyway. But now, imagine that you have an anti-gravity technology, but it costs you $16 trillion to build one of these things, and you can't exactly, as I put it to George Ann Hughes on the Byte Show lately, you can't exactly just go to Boeing and order a dozen of these things, all right? So in other words, the hidden system of finance was put into place with that enormous sum of money to create things that cost an enormous sum of money to build. The engineering is extraordinarily complex. That's my point. 3D printing, conceivably, can bring down the cost of just about anything, both in terms of energy requirements and labor. These are the two major components of manufacturing costs. So we're looking at something, I think, that ultimately came out of the Black Projects world and is being leaked into the public world as a manufacturing transforming process because there's some agenda that we're not quite aware of just off stage that's driving all this. I've been suggesting that it does have to do with politics, and it may even have something to do, so to speak, with cosmic politics. I've been suggesting this. But the real ETs, flying saucers, anti-gravity aside, if you're just stuck even still in the rocket world and going out to mine asteroids with rockets, 3D printing will transform the whole process, the whole industry, just as it's going to do here on Earth. Now, why am I bothering you with all of this? And I've got to make this quick. Phys.org is reporting that scientists have now sent, not optically, but electronically, by utilizing the phenomenon of quantum entanglement, have now sent information from one side of a computer chip to another, but not through the circuitry. All right? And they've done this electronically. Now, I want to read what Phys.org says about this. Quote, usually in telecommunication, information is transmitted by electromagnetic pulses. In mobile communications, for example, microwave pulses are used, while in fiber connections it is optical pulses. In contrast, quantum teleportation does not transport the information carrier itself, but only the information. This is possible due to quantum mechanical properties of the system, in particular, the entanglement established between the sender and the receiver. Note that. For non-physicists, entanglement constitutes a magic link between the two parties which exploits the laws of quantum physics. Now, I just stop and point out that even for physicists, the idea of entanglement is magical, all right? So you don't even need to qualify it. I don't think you'd have to look long or hard to find a quantum physicist that will tell you, yeah, this is pretty much like magic, all right? As a prerequisite, continuing with the article, for quantum teleportation, and here comes the curveball, an entangled state is created between the sender and the receiver. After that, the two parties can be physically separated from each other while preserving their shared entangled state, unquote. Now, I want you to consider that and what I've just told you about scanners and about 3D printing in space. And I want you to couple that with something else that's been going on in the news, and that's 3D printing of organic body parts. In some cases, retinas, in some cases, ears or eardrums. They are using this technology and experimenting with this technology to create the ability to print on 3D printers body parts. Now, combine all these technologies and concepts together. Entanglement, scanners, with the ability to scan down to a very small level. Now, what I'm suggesting is we are taking the first steps in the technology tree to releasing into the public the basic components at a primitive stage of what we saw in the last century, in the 60s and 70s, of the Star Trek transporter. We are a long, long way off. The very idea of doing all of this now, there are so many engineering complications I can't even begin to tell you. But you'll notice what the basic components in that transporter system were. Scanners, an ability to break things down to an atomic or molecular level and assemble them someplace else by transmitting the information. All right? And effectively, that would have involved a 3D printer at the other end. And it would have relied upon this phenomenon of entanglement, albeit at a state or scale that is beyond what quantum physicists are talking about and doing now. Way, way beyond. Don't get me wrong here. But the basic components, the basic things that you would need to do that are there. So in other words, we're looking at something happening, folks. There's something off stage, in my opinion, that they're not telling us, but they're releasing key, crucial components into the public that are going to dramatically transform the world that we're in. If you have children or grandchildren, the world that they will live in as adults, or their children, will live in as adults and the one that you and I live in now are going to be vastly, vastly different. All right, folks, that does it in about 20 minutes. This is Joseph Farrell, News and Views from the Nefarium. See you on the flip side.